very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I'd like through you to say good night to the Barbadian public as well. As promised yesterday, we would keep the country updated every step of the way as we seek to go through this very difficult and challenging time that has been that has occurred this week. With us today, once again, are members of the Barbados Light and Power group and the Ilaro group, and I'm happy to say that in addition to Mr. Blackman, who Barbadians know well, we have with us also Mr. Rick Janego, who was with us last night, who is chairman of Ilaro Caribbean and the chief operating officer, and also joining us is the chief executive officer of the Ilaro group from Canada. And we thank you, Mr. Balfour, for joining us and coming down to reflect the seriousness with which your company has treated to this issue. In addition, of course, is Mr. Peter Williams, who is well known to the Barbadian public also as a continuous face of the Barbados Light and Power. We also have the other members of government, the Attorney General, Minister of Energy, Water and Public Utilities, the Chairman of the Barbados National Oil Company, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry, the CEO of the Barbados National Oil Company, the Chair of the Committee in the Renewal and Negotiations of the Licenses, Mr. Patterson Cheltenham, and Ms. Tricia Watson, and the officers of the Barbados Water Authority, the CEO and Dr. Mwanza. The Chairman is also here, and Dr. Seeley, and of course the relevant permanent secretaries from the Ministry of Public Works, Maintenance, Prime Minister's Office. And I'm happy that the Inter-American Development Bank, at very short notice and at my request yesterday, flew in a number of persons today who have literally dropped everything to be here. And we thank you for joining us in this moment of our need. Let me start with them. We have made arrangements for them to do an independent assessment and to be able to see how we can be more robust in the defense and integrity of the system. Both the government and the Barbados Light and Power have agreed on this, and they will set about the task from as early as tomorrow morning with respect to getting us to get to the bottom of these matters. Yesterday evening when we met, there was an indication that the Barbados Light and Power felt that some of the fuel which they had been receiving in the last shipment, which contained phenols, was part of the source of the problem, or the source of the problem, as far as they were concerned. And as a result, last night we went to examine how best we could deal with the emptying of that bunker, the tank that has that contaminated fuel. It is not an easy task. The initial pumps that were moved at great difficulty last night were not able to function effectively this morning. They have tried another smaller pump this evening, which is now working, but the rate of flow of that pump is too slow, and they're expecting a part to be flown in for the older pump, larger pump, by tomorrow, which hopefully will expedite the process of having that fuel pumped back to the tank at Holborn. And by tomorrow evening, we expect that the Barbados National Oil Company will have new results with respect to the fuel which is there. As to whether the source of the problem is the fuel or old equipment or other things, we don't know for certain. But as I said to you yesterday, our objective is to be able to ensure the integrity of the system going forward. Against that background, we also asked the Barbados Light and Power, and I'll ask Mr. Blackman to update us now on that, the additional crews that are being brought into the island, as well as the additional equipment that is being procured via rental, and in addition to that, the decision not to pass on the cost of the rentals to the people of the country, for which they will have to rely to provide the stability. Mr. Blackman?
Thank you, Prime Minister, and good night. As the Prime Minister indicated, there are a number of steps that we agreed to investigate last night when we met, and as we would have updated just a short while ago, we've made a few decisions today and taken some actions. We've as we reported last night, been able to restore the entire system. And again, I want to thank the teams involved in the restoration for restoring the network to full or 100% service, as well as continuing to work during the course of today to bring additional generating capacity on to shore up reserves. The items that we would have worked on today, one would have been in relation to immediate relief from rental generation, 12 megawatts of rental generation to be delivered to the island by December 5th. And as the Prime Minister has indicated, we've agreed we would cover those costs of rental as well as installation, and to get that here in as quick as we possibly can. We are also evaluating additional rental options. We've had some proposals in today, and those are currently being evaluated, which could be installed in a short time frame as well. And the purpose of the rental generation is to have that additional capacity and security and insurance on the ground as quickly as possible. So that has started, and the order would have been placed for 12 today. Apart from the rental generation, more long-term solution would be an energy bridge, which we spoke about last night. That's a 33 megawatt plant to be installed at Trent's in St. Lucie. We had initially been talking to the supplier about delivery in a 12-month time frame. We're working to get that time frame down to as short as possible. And right now we're looking at middle of 2020, so around June. And the rental generation will serve as the insurance of backup during the period it requires to get that permanent solution in place. So we continue to work on that. And we have some technical resources, as mentioned, some on the ground already in terms of providing support from an asset management standpoint, but also resources that will assist in evaluating some of the systems, providing backup support to our teams so that we have 24-hour support essentially from an operational and maintenance standpoint in our power stations while we work to resolve the issues that we're currently encountering. So those are essentially the measures that we've taken today. As the Prime Minister mentioned, we are working with the teams from the NOCL to return the fuel that is in the low-speed diesel storage tank back to the Holborn terminal so that that tank can receive new fuel, which is being tested and we should get those test results tomorrow to confirm that no contaminants are in that fuel.
The only other point that Mr. Blackman left out was that the rental equipment of the 12 megawatts that is expected to arrive on the island on the 5th of December. As we said last night, much of the work to the site has been done. There's a little construction work still with some pipes to be done, but they anticipate, and the Light and Power has advised us that they should be installed and commissioned no later than the 15th of December. So that 12 megawatts. When by tomorrow, hopefully, we'll get the information from them on the additional rental capacity which they're seeking to bring in, which will bridge the gap until they get the energy bridge completely installed on a permanent basis. Are there any questions?
Last night, you mentioned that there will be a board meeting in Light and Power today, and the issue of compensation with the person. Is there any update?
Well, first of all, the board meeting is not with us and the Light and Power. The Light and Power had their own, Emira Caribbean had their own board meeting. So I can't tell you or speak on behalf of that because it would be hearsay and entirely out of place and inappropriate for me to do that. So Mr. Blackman, or perhaps the chairman of Emira Caribbean is here, and they can speak to that.
So I'm not as privileged to speak about the actual discussions in the board meeting, but the approvals we received today that were in support of bringing confidence to the citizens of Barbados to ensure that we bring generation in as quickly as possible, and understanding that our company will absorb the cost of those rentals, not the customer. We also advanced discussions on approval for the additional generation facility that we've been working on for some time and been working with the ministry on advancing approvals for that. And we have with the government support the ability to advance that generation as well. That was approved today, and we are proceeding with the financing of that project as well.
So there were no discussions about a rebate or anything like that?
We understand the discussion last night. I apologize, I'm probably not looking, I have my back to a camera, but we understand the importance of it, but our Barbados Light and Power team will look into it and will assess it, and we will be talking to our customers, but our first focus primarily is to restore the confidence of the facilities that we're operating and to assure Barbados that the system is integrated.
Let me help a little bit in this matter. There is no doubt that the most important thing is for the power not to go off again. And that's what Light and Power is focusing on today. But we have also indicated to Light and Power as recent as before you came into this room that the people of this country are going to ask these questions. And while we accept and thank them for not passing on the cost of the rental to the population, the reality is that that is one component of the process. And therefore, we simply ask AmeriCaribbean to recognize that the country is going to ask these questions in the same way that they've asked them of the Barbados Water Authority. Okay? So, the short answer is they've not addressed it yet. They've only addressed the question of the stability of the electricity generation.
Mr. Balfour, glad to see you here, and I think your presence indicates the seriousness of which Ilaro is addressing this issue. Ilaro was bought over Light and Power in 2014, was it? I can't remember.
It was before 2014.
Before 2014, good. Were you aware that they were utilizing equipment, some of which was over 34 years old? And given that, while we appreciate that we're waiting on Cahill, the waste to energy plan, that came off the table about 4 years ago. So why is it that the archaic old equipment was not addressed?
Just to be fair, Maria, Cahill didn't come off the table until the change of government. That's the truth. So, and in fact, the Attorney General is sitting to my right, and far from coming off the table, we have had to engage counsel because they are now seeking to sue the government of Barbados to recover damages as a result of the agreements that were signed by the Prime Minister and 4 ministers of the Crown with respect to Cahill.
That's another aspect of it.
By the former Prime Minister and 4 ministers of the Crown then.
That's another aspect of it.
No, but that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that it didn't come off the table.
Yes, I'm still asking like Mira, why is it that it has taken so long to address the old equipment?
Okay.
No, I would seek to answer that question. As the Prime Minister indicated, some of those projects, which include the Cahill project, as well as the biomass project at Andrews, have not come off the table until quite recently in the scheme of things where it comes to planning for generation, which takes some time to do because of the nature of the investments that are involved. So what we've been doing is, we have been doing some of the pre-work and the pre-planning. We would have had investments and evaluations of plants that we would have had ready to go once the direction would have changed in relation to those projects. And we have in fact gone ahead, done the work to evaluate options, identified preferred suppliers, and are ready to mobilize, which is why we were able to update as we did today. But some of those things we would have had to wait for certain decisions to be made to be able to proceed. The investments that we have made in the existing plant are quite substantial to keep them going, and it's not all investment in extending the life of the existing equipment. That is part of it, like the steam plant and the low-speed diesels we've been reinvesting in, but we've also been investing in modernization of the grid. We've invested $40 million in the smart metering project and the associated infrastructure, communication infrastructure. 2 years ago, we invested over $40 million in solar at Trent. We invested about $16 million last year in batteries. And we have been reinvesting, yes, in the generating equipment that we have at Spring Garden, at SeaWorld, and at Darcy. And we have been looking at the additional options for new capacity, which we're able to report on today. But the process, there is a lead time and a runway associated with it. There are certain steps that need to happen in the interest of the public, like environmental impact assessments, the work with town planning, consultations with stakeholders, and those are the things that we've been working on over the past year to be at the point where we're able now to say, yes, we're proceeding with the 33 megawatt energy bridge at Trent.
Would you be able to give me a cost to the amount of money that we spent when they're pouring out these short-term fixes? In terms of the new generators and the additional fees on the ground?
Yeah, in the order of maybe $4 million, around $4 million for the rentals in the first instance. We are looking, like I said earlier, at some additional options. That information we don't have just yet on the additional rentals. We are working then on the energy bridge as well over the longer term, which is a $100 million plus project.
Yes?
You've spoken to investment as it relates to the equipment and infrastructure. Going forward, are you looking at investing more in the skill set that we need as well? Because you have a lot of technicians who are not as old as the equipment, but who have been there for years and will be retiring as we know that's the situation that we have. Are you investing in all that stuff?
Yes, we invest significantly in our people in training, retraining and retooling as the industry changes. Over the years, we've seen many changes, certainly in my time frame, even just going to computer control systems from old pneumatics. We would have had to put our technicians and so on through continuous training and upgrading new skills to be able to deal with those upgrades. And similarly today, we've seen the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy, and that itself brings new requirements, require new skill sets that we need to invest in. Similarly, digitalization, so I spoke about smart meters before, we would have seen skills change completely. So for example, everybody in the room would be familiar with meter readers, having to go out and read meters periodically, and that's billing, interim bill, an estimate, and then a red bill the following month for residential customers. With new meters, we were able to read remotely, and yes, that affected meter reader jobs, but it was replaced by a different type of skill set, a person who manages big data that comes in from the smart meter. So you have smart meter technicians and data analysts that are new jobs that would have been created and new skills that we would have had to train staff for. So those are some of the examples of the retraining and retooling that is ongoing in the industry, not just at Light and Power, but throughout the industry.
I have a question for the NOC. The Prime Minister just mentioned that the fuel will be put back into the pump. I think, can you explain to us when that happens, what is the next step? Because this is contaminated fuel, and I think that pump is the one that's used to actually deliver the fuel.
Maria, just to be fair, last night you may recall Mr. Blackman actually addressed this and said, I believe that they can use the fuel in the steam.
That would have been not happy press.
Okay,
but
go ahead, please.
So the equipment that we have that burn heavy fuel oil are two types of equipment, two technologies. One is the low-speed diesels that we have been experiencing the challenges with. Those are reciprocating engines with cylinders and pistons and fuel pumps. And then there is a steam plant, which is out for maintenance at the moment, but that's a different technology that uses boilers and turbines. The fuel, those units that use boilers and turbines are far more forgiving where fuel is concerned. So while that fuel can't be used in diesel engines without creating challenges and problems, it can be used in the steam station once those units are back in service. So that is the approach that we've been looking to employ.
So it'll be stored back at Holborn, but ultimately it can be used by Light and Power in the steam turbines.
And I don't know if it has ever been disclosed, the names of the two companies that source this fuel from. Has it ever been disclosed? Can you say what are the two companies? Petrodan and Simon, I think.
No, I think that's a That's a nice thing to say. We don't. We get our fuel from two companies. One is Novum, and the other is Vital. What they do is that they aggregate fuel and bring it in to satisfy the specs that the Light and Power has asked us for. The word contaminant, another person may use the word the additive that is used in that fuel. What it really means is that the Light and Power's machinery is intolerant to the fuel that is being used. The spec had changed a bit, and we have constantly maintained the spec that the Light and Power has asked us for. What we are trying to do now is working with the Light and Power to deliver the fuel without the phenols that have been added to that fuel. So we have to be careful that there's not an impression that the BNOCL is bringing an inferior quality of our fuel. It's a different type of fuel. Light and Power is now saying that this spec is not good for our machines. Please take it. The fact that it can be used to burn in the other machines means clearly that it is a usable fuel. Now understand that heavy fuel oil is at the bottom of the distillation crack. So it is by definition a very, very dirty fuel. Fortunately, Light and Power is moving on, as Mr. Blackman has said. So we have to be careful about the nomenclature used, because we have to understand that BNTCL for 40 years, or from 83, has been bringing a high quality, dependable fuel for everyone. And this one is one of the shipments that is in question, over the many hundreds that we have brought in.
From these same two companies?
Yes.
Yes. In addition to that, you asked what we're going to do with the fuels. We have several other customers on the island that use that product, and they're not experiencing the type of issue.
So rest assured that this is not a court of law. I'm not an arbitral decision-making body, and I am not here to preside over who is right or wrong between Light and Power and between BNOCL. Suffice it to say that our interest is to make sure that there is stability in the energy generation process, and as a result of that, that is why we've also asked the Inter-American Development Bank to send in persons to help us in understanding what has transpired. So I'd like us to be able to focus on that. I've told you there's more than enough time to deal with the issues of blame and allocation of responsibility, but tonight is not that time.
In terms of the results and of the findings when we carried out the investigation, because unfortunately it took something as major as the impact on Light and Power to bring light to the situation in terms of the change in the fuel. Persons have been complaining, like some people have been complaining over the years about feeling a change, noticing a change, but obviously it was nothing to the grand scale of what happened at Light and Power that then trickled down to everyone. When they're using the gas or using the fuel, some persons have made those comments over the years. So I just mean when the investigations are completed, the findings will be made public that everybody can just peruse them.
I think that everything that this government has done has been made public, even to our own detriment, especially as it relates to matters that don't relate, where public accountability is critical. And the only thing we've not released is matters of national security. So we have no reason to change our modus operandi.
Just one final question. There was a water outage at Sheraton this afternoon. I was wondering if it was related to the electricity or where was it? There was a water outage. Yes. At Sheraton this afternoon. I was wondering if it was a water problem or if it was an issue with the electricity or...
That would have been an isolated problem unrelated to the electrical supply.
So
unrelated to the electrical suppliers.
And can you give us an update on what's happening with the water issue we have with that? I'm still experiencing problems at the pump, at pumping stations.
We have been working
People
fiercely.
cannot hear you, Mr. Alexander. Certainly he's not going to hear you. So you may want to come up here and you may want to please speak loudly. Thank you.
Thank you. With respect to where we are in terms of the Barbados Water Authority and the substations and our water supply, we are pretty much back substantially online with the exception of 2 stations where we've been having some challenges with damaged equipment, primarily Newmarket and Hampton. Those 2 stations are still producing, but not at the level, not at the capacity that they will normally produce. We have crews actually working right now as we speak to repair that equipment, and it's going to take probably another 12 to 24 hours, and then we'll be back up to full capacity. But I think principally one of the points that remains is that it takes about 24 to 48 hours for the distribution system to be fully replenished, and therefore we will still see bouts of water outages in several areas.
Give me an idea of where those outages would occur.
It's still scattered. We have 1 or 2 areas in St. Lucie that we're still trying to work on, St. Joseph in particular, and areas of Christchurch. The Hampton pumping station would affect primarily some areas in Christchurch. That at Newmarket, which feeds Hanson and in turn rather Fort George, will also be affecting Wildy, Clapham, Vauxhall, Fort George, etc. So those are the general areas that will see low pressure, or in some instances, intermittent pressure.
But you anticipate that within another day, you should be able to finish the repairs on the damaged equipment.
Yes, Prime Minister, that is correct.
All going well. If there are no other questions, I want to thank those of you who have been working tirelessly. Minister?
I just want to take this opportunity now because the Water Authority issued a statement, I believe, to the nation, but there's been something going around suggesting a presence of E. coli in our water system. Has been making the rounds. We've been getting a lot of questions about it at the Water Authority, and there is no truth to that at all. The BWA has undertaken some stepped-up testing along with the Ministry of Health in relation to the incidences and the reports of discolored water in some of the northern parishes. The tests have revealed a reduced level of residual chlorine in the system, and we've taken measures to correct it, which have seen the increase in the residual chlorine levels. But what has been circulating is a dangerous misrepresentation and an untruth. And I just want to make that clear. We've issued a statement, but it has been making the rounds, and I don't want anybody to run off with the wrong information. If you want to get information from the Barbados Water Authority about our systems or any issues we're experiencing at any given time, please use the official channels or social media platforms or contact the Barbados Water Authority for the information. I urge you, do not just forward on things that you see that do not come from the Barbados Water Authority, because that's how we spread misinformation and cause panic. Thank you.
At this stage, I just want to thank all who have continued to work over the course of the last 24 hours to be able to guarantee the stability and the robustness of the system for the people of this country, and for the purposes of our being able to instill confidence also to those who are visiting us and for those who want to invest with us. This matter is continuing to engage and occupy the government's highest priority, as we are sure that EMIRA understands and Barbados Light and Power understands by the presence of the EMIRA Chief Executive Officer here and by the presence of the Chief Operating Officer of EMIRA as Chairman of EMIRA Caribbean. We will continue to update the country until such time as we feel that we have the remaining details of the puzzle as to when everything is going to fit together. And we reckon that there may be another 24 to 48 hours before we can have absolute clarity as to all of the other remaining elements. We know for sure the 12 megawatt rental, we're waiting on the additional rentals. The other crews are coming in from tomorrow onwards, and as we said, we will continue to make sure that we can get the fuel oil, the heavy fuel oil pumped out of the existing tank at Spring Garden back to Holborn. So thank you very much, and for the members of the media, I know that you have also been working beyond the call of duty in seeking to keep the public updated on this matter. Thank you, and God bless. Have a good night.